Hi everyone, and today's episode of the channel is going to be a weird one because this one is just going to be an update and also a lesson. So, so number one, the updates are I am going to be changing my schedule going forward to focus more on weekends as soon as the new month starts. And alongside that, um, I will be heading back to books. Um, if you want me go back to Dracula or Frankenstein, let me know in the comments. But but now to celebrate my mom's recent birthday, we are going to be doing Pride and Prejudice by Jane Austen, since that was one of the earliest books she had read to me when I was growing up. And also, there are still a lot of lessons to be learned from Jane Austen novels. And since she was such an important figure in literary realism, the use of sarcasm in stories, and the blend of proto-romantic slash romantic movement with current affairs, especially if you ever have read Mansfield Park, her lesson on the disgustingness of the British slave trade and the use of slavery in their colonies. These are, and yeah, just when I get to Jane Austen's Pride and Prejudice, I will probably be doing a lot more like lessons and understanding statements before the readings that I have done in the previous readings. Anywho's it. For today, our our short little lesson is going to be on why studying medical history, pandemic history, and public health history is a lot more important than you might think. So, we need to understand that the terms epidemic, pandemic, and these other titles we use to describe a pandemic and the tools have been around for a long time, especially like quarantine has roots during the times of the bubonic plague in Venice and other regions. Um, Also, they have always this idea of taking political action during a time of crisis, at times caused by disease, does have a long history even in the United States. One of the most important book recommendations I can give you is probably Pox Americana, the Great Smallpox Epidemic of 1775 to 1782 by Elizabeth A. Fenn. This details um, the smallpox epidemic of the time and how it changed the course of human history, especially with the devastation to Native American groups, the use of mass inoculation and staggering inoculation during during the American Revolution, and the tough decision made by the Continental Congress and George Washington to use their political power to force the troops to get inoculated after the realization of how much disease would play a factor going forward in the American Revolution. So, and alongside that, we also have to consider For instance, the great influenza pandemic slash epidemic of 1918, because uh, like part of the reason why things did get bad was in part when the disease was happening. World War One was wrapping up. The United States was getting involved in the war. There are chances that the use of chemical weapons during the war caused mutation of disease, but because of war bond drives, the already morale, the already low morale in areas of conflict, news about influenza had to be suppressed by the press and by governments because, like, because of issues of morale and political consequence. This is kind of why the term Spanish flu did get coined, because Spain was neutral in the conflict, so they were more able to discuss in their newspapers and politics what was going on. So, because of that, we need to recognize that how we understand disease and epidemics and pandemics in history overlaps a lot with political and sociological history, and why I would highly recommend people to research this stuff, especially like historians who are more into political and sociological history, because issues like public health, who has access to information, does at times have roots in larger political scenarios and at times race history. Because, for instance, access to things like the polio vaccine, it had a lot to do with class and race. And public health exhibits, the history of public health exhibits and services, especially during the times of the AIDS epidemic and well, that's the number one example, had a lot to do with sexual orientation, race, gender. Uh, all this stuff overlaps, especially when it comes to history of medicine and access to it. So basically, my main lesson today is do some research on medical history and try to have a better understanding of, especially after, since we are currently living towards the hopefully the tail end of our own pandemic, and since we're kind of living in the after period of a series of crucial events, maybe looking back is probably the right thing to do right now. Anyway, I hope y'all have a good rest of your day, and I'll see you next time.